Right, good afternoon, everyone. We are going to get started. Welcome, everyone. Please, if you have not already, please put your name and the name of your organization in the chat. And welcome to our technical assistance webinar for insurance. Today we have Charity One Insurance Agency as our presenters. I am going to start with introductions of our presenters today. I will start with myself. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joanne Sanchez. I am the project director for the third-party administrator with Amity Foundation. A pleasure to meet everyone. Congratulations on your award for those of you that are part of our cohort year 3. We are excited to bring you on board. And so I am going to go ahead and pass it over to Carol.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Carol Marin. I am the Director of Operations for the Third Party Administrator. Again, congratulations, and we look forward to working with you all. Thank you. Mina?
Hi, everyone. My name is Mina Cabrion. I am the Training and Technical Assistance Coordinator. We're so happy to have you here, and I will pass it over to Lisa.
Thank you, Mina. Thank you, Joanne and Carol. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Lisa. I'm from Charity One Insurance Agency. I was invited on today to talk about insurance requirements, and I'm really excited to get started on that. So thank you, everyone, for having me, and congratulations to the new awardees and past awardees. We can go ahead and change over the slide. Here's a little bit of our agenda today, what we'll be going over, just a broad overview, and we can get right into the meat of it. Starting with why you need a broker, I'm going to ask Mina to go to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so just to start off, we're going to be talking about commercial insurance today, and this will be helpful if you currently have insurance or don't have insurance at all. We'll be talking about the different timelines to receive quotes, timelines to receive additional insured and various endorsements, what the quoting process looks like. And I want to start off with why you need a broker. It's a question that we get a lot. You can't really go directly to insurance companies in commercial insurance. Most of these carriers require that you work through a broker. The role of the insurance company is to provide the insurance or provide the contract and backup claims. The role of a broker is to be the servicing arm of the process. So we're here to obtain quotes, to shop with different carriers, to compare your options with different carriers. We would provide an analysis on your operations to make recommendations about what insurance coverages you may or may not need, and also assist you with being compliant with the current contracts or relationships that you do have. When you're looking for a broker, you want to be sure that you're working with someone who understands your organization. So a lot of times working with the corner agent or the corner farmer State Farm agent, they're not going to have access to the products that you'd need where there's higher insurance limits that are required or special endorsements that are required. So it's important to find someone who is familiar working with nonprofits and social service organizations and familiar with meeting insurance requirements. So the best thing you can do when you're first talking to somebody is to share the insurance requirements that you're trying to meet and see if that's something they're familiar with and have experience working with. If they don't have experience working with that, then I would recommend to continue looking. Otherwise, you'll get to the point where you're shopping, and it comes down to the last minute and it turns out they couldn't do it. So if you start off by providing those insurance requirements up front, you'll be able to gauge whether or not they'll be able to help you. They'll either be confident with them or they won't be sure. If they're not sure, I recommend you keep looking. And once you've selected a broker, you aren't married to them forever. I recommend evaluating the relationship every few years, and of course, shopping your insurance policy every few years, whether through that broker or another broker. The market changes all the time. Rates change, carrier appetites change. So recommend looking at that every couple of years. We can go ahead and move to the next slide. So next we'll talk about the quoting process. Once you've located a broker, It's kind of a lengthy process. It's not like getting a auto insurance quote or a homeowner's quote where you provide your make, model, VIN. There's a lot more that goes into it. In personal lines or in personal insurance, you can simply enter those things into the computer and a quote will pop out. It's that really that simple and that instant. But here on this side, working in specialty insurance, working with nonprofit and social service organizations is not that simple. There's a whole process that goes into it, and the file touches many, many hands before a quote is actually released. So it starts off with the agent and the organization conducting an intake call and completing applications and going through this whole quoting process, which I'll explain. But through this process, it's touched by many hands. Towards the end of the process, an actual underwriter picks up the file, reviews all the documentation, and provides a price, about the bottom line price for the product. So we have people entering information into computers and gets into the underwriter's queue, which could have hundreds and hundreds of files before they get to your file. So at the end of the day, it's important to get started on the insurance process as soon as possible. Is the message that I'm trying to share here. We want to start off this shopping process, discovery process as soon as possible because it is a process. So what that process looks like, depending where you are in your grant application, you either can have a letter of intent or a quote or both. If you're at the beginning of the process, or you can ask a broker to provide a letter of intent, which is conducting a discovery to be sure that the agent can provide you with the quote at the end of the day. So what our process would look like to make that determination is we would need some basic information like your contact information, a description of your programs and a participant count for those programs or projections on the count if you're not sure if it's a new program or a new venture. They would need to know where those services are being provided. And also we could need the following: applications, resume, financials, business plan, a copy of the executed contract, the formal insurance requirements. We could need licenses. And if you've had prior insurance, we could need your loss history. But we need all of that for a letter of intent because we need to be sure that we'll have a market for you. If we don't know, then it could come down to the last minute and it turns out we couldn't have a market or it was going to take longer than expected. So at least if we have that basic information, we can be confident with releasing that letter of intent, knowing that we can back that up with a quote in a couple of weeks. So to get a quote, we would definitely need all of that information. If you've had prior insurance, it's very important to share that with the agent that you're working with. Some of these policies have what's called a retro date, and it's very important to address that retro date or you could lose years of insurance coverage. So be sure to disclose to your agent if you've had prior coverage. We'd also need loss runs in that case. So that's a little bit about what would be needed to get a quote or a letter of intent. When you're working with the broker, please let them know your timelines, coverage needs, and other goals that you're trying to accomplish. So if you have a deadline, you need to provide that certificate of insurance by X date, let them know that up front so they can either request a rush or provide what you need when you need it. On average, it takes a week to 2 weeks to receive quotes, sometimes longer for complicated scenarios. So please, again, be sure to provide sufficient lead time. A complicated scenario would be if you've had prior insurance coverage and maybe you've had lapses in coverage or you've been with a couple of different carriers in the past and now we're having to chase down loss runs from 4 or 5 different carriers. That can really put additional time to wait and get those back and locate the carriers. So at the end of the day, please provide sufficient lead time to allow for those type of things to happen. Once the quote's back, the process is pretty quick and easy from there. We collect signatures and payment if needed. Once coverage is bound, a policy number is pretty easy to turn around. What takes a while to get back, however, are the endorsements that are needed to be attached to the certificate of insurance. It can take an additional 2 weeks to get those endorsements back from the insurance company. So again, sufficient lead time is needed for you to be fully compliant. To be fully compliant, you need to have the certificate of insurance with all endorsements attached. So the moral of the story is sufficient lead time. If you have a broker that you're working with, call them today, call them after we get off of this line to get this process started. And if you do have a current broker, I recommend sharing the insurance requirements with them and make sure that they see exactly what is needed to be fully compliant. I think we can move to the next slide. And so the next slide will be looking at the insurance requirements that are needed to be compliant. First off is the general liability, which is a core coverage most organizations start with. And the limits that are needed on that are 2 million aggregate and a 1 million per occurrence. General liability is what it's most known for is covering slips and falls, so bodily injury, property damage, and personal injury. Professional liability is another coverage that's required, and that's with the $2 million aggregate, 1 million per occurrence. And I'll kind of back up on what that means. So the aggregate is the most that the insurance policy will pay in a year, and the per occurrence is the amount that it will pay out per claim. So with these limits on the general liability, you would be able to have two $2 million claims or a bunch of $500,000 claims. So that's kind of how those limits work, the per occurrence and the aggregate. Professional liability is the same. Auto liability, there's many different ways to structure an auto policy, but the minimum requirement is going to be hired and non-owned auto. So the variables will be, if the organization owns autos, then you want to consider getting full coverage, which is having physical damage, or just the liability coverage to cover third-party claims and lawsuits. But the minimum that we want to see is the hired and non-owned auto, and that's with the $1 million limit. There's a requirement for abuse and molestation, and that's with the $1 million limit, aggregate and per occurrence. And then the workers' compensation at $1 million. The next slide we can move to will go into what these coverages are. So the general liability is a core coverage most organizations carry to start with. And a lot of times if you're working with a funder or a venue, landlord, third parties that you're collaborating with are going to want the general liability insurance. Professional liability is going to cover any kind of negligence, errors and omissions on part of professionals. So if you have professionals that are volunteering, employed for you, this is going to extend coverage to them as well as they're acting in their professional capacity. The auto, the most common question I get is, hey, we don't own cars. What kind of insurance do we need? So this is what we're talking about here is the hired and non-owned auto. And what this covers is employees or volunteers driving their own car on behalf of the organization. This is a liability coverage. It covers the organization if they're sued for this employee or volunteer driving. So let's say it's a bad accident, there's a discovery conducted, and it's determined that the volunteer or employee was driving on behalf of the organization. If the injury was bad enough, they're going to be looking for payment, looking for compensation. They're going to be looking for the deepest pockets. So if they hear a business or an organization was involved in this, the attorneys are going to want to bring those parties on. So that's why we have the hired and non-owned auto to cover those type of lawsuits and to cover the organization if they're named in the lawsuit. On the other hand, the employer volunteer should have their own coverage. You want to verify that they have their own insurance to protect themselves, and they should be aware that they need to have full coverage or physical damage on their car if they are concerned about having their vehicle repaired if it's damaged, because this coverage does not extend to cover the employer volunteer's car. That's their responsibility to insure their own vehicle. So this is intended to cover the nonprofit if they're named in a lawsuit while those cars are on the streets. And then you can also schedule a vehicle. Any vehicles that are owned or registered by the nonprofit or social service organization can be scheduled on the policy as well. And that can be liability or full coverage as well. The non-owned auto, just talked about that one. And it's highly recommended. Some insurance companies require that the drivers carry insurance with $100,000, $300,000 limits, which is higher than the California legal limit. So check with your insurance company to see if that's going to be required of your team. The abuse and molestation or sexual misconduct insurance is pretty straightforward on what it covers, allegations of abuse or molestation. And then finally, workers' comp is required by law once you hire your first employee, and it provides coverage for employee injuries. There's different types of inclusions, exclusions for nonprofit and social service. One notable mention is for-profits can exclude the owners from coverage. They don't need to be included if you're a for-profit owner. Nonprofits cannot have any exclusions. So if there are compensated officers or directors, they need to be included on the insurance. And I think we can move to the next slide. Yeah, we can move to the next slide. Perfect. Certificates of insurance. Okay, so certificate of insurance is a illustration. I'm sure many of us have seen the certificate before. It's a standard form. All agencies, brokers use the same format. And what it is an illustration of the insurance coverage that you have. The certificates of insurance are created within the broker's office or management system. The certificates are created in-house. So a lot of times you can get a certificate of insurance turned around very, very quickly because they create them in-house. Endorsements, on the other hand, are not created in-house. Most times we do not have the authority as brokers to create endorsements. Some we can, additional insured, the basic general liability additional insured. Some carriers give brokers the authority to do that. Not all of them. The most carriers want to have control of the endorsements that are attached. So what an endorsement is an enhancement or an addition to your insurance policy. The insurance policy is a legal contract between you and the insurance company, and the only way you can alter that contract is with an endorsement or a rider. So these endorsements are attached onto the policy, and they're very serious. So that's a lot of times why the insurance companies want to have control over all the endorsements that are issued out. So they come from the company. Now the process is you have to send the request to the insurance company. They have their processing and turnaround times, at which point it can be released to you. It varies, the turnaround time varies from carrier to carrier. Some carriers will release it to you within 24 hours. Some carriers right now are literally saying 15 to 20 days to return endorsements. So please don't delay when it comes to making these requests for endorsements from your insurance company. So the certificate of insurance is an illustration. The endorsements are the policy forms attached to that illustration to back up what that certificate says. And that's why funders and landlords want to see that attached, because that's the way that you can actually verify that that coverage is in place rather than just seeing the illustration. So the different endorsements that we're seeing frequently and that Amity is looking for are the additional insured endorsement attached to the general liability, the waiver of subrogation attached to the general liability, auto and workers' comp, the primary and non-contributory endorsement attached to the general liability and auto, and 30-day notice of cancellation attached to all policies. Some insurance companies will charge additional premium to release these forms. It varies again from carrier to carrier. A lot of times it's $50 for one, and really can be across the board with the pricing. And some carriers do it for free. And that's the ideal situation, is that there's no charge. But that's, again, if you have a lot of relationships, that's something you want to discuss with the broker up front. Like, hey, I have like 50 additional insured endorsements. Is that something they're going to charge per, or can I schedule them all up front? Something you want to keep in mind through the quoting process is how many additional insureds you're going to need, and endorsements that you're going to need. So I can briefly go over, I think I have time to briefly go over what these are. The additional insured is adding on a third party as another named insured onto your policy. So that way, if something does happen, let's say there is one of those auto claims and the person injured retains an attorney, they're going to start asking questions, and they're going to want to bring in everybody. They're going to want to bring in your organization. And if they find out that your organization was able to be having people drive on the street because you got a grant from Amity, they might want to bring Amity in as well. So that's where your policy comes in to defend both your organization and Amity. So that endorsement is saying, hey, we're going to extend coverage to them as well as it's required by contract. The waiver of subrogation will waive the right for the insurance company to recover any kind of legal costs through defending the claims. And it will make it so that the nonprofit or social service organization's insurance is primary, and the third party's insurance is not having to contribute into that claim. The 30-day notice of cancellation is an important one. Amity and other third parties want to be sure that this policy remains in place. And if it's canceled for any reason, they'll have this, what this endorsement does is give them a notification. Hey, this policy, they're having a payment problem, and it's going to cancel in 30 days. So we want you to know. So they'll be informed if there's a notice of cancellation, and they'll probably reach out and say, hey, make sure your insurance is in place. So what this endorsement does is it will automatically let them know if the insurance is in jeopardy. So that's really in a nutshell what these endorsements are. And that's pretty much the content that we had today. I'm sure there's some questions. I'm happy to answer any questions about insurance or the insurance process. I know it can be very complicated, and we've worked with many Amity recipients, so I'm here to be a resource.
Thank you so much, Lisa. So I am going to go into the questions from the chat first.
Okay.
One specifically stands out just because it goes with a slide. So slide 6, which is the insurance coverage definitions. Someone asked, are all items listed on that slide mandatory? So the general liability, professional liability, business auto, non-own autos, sexual misconduct, and worker compensation.
The only ones that are, I wouldn't even say optional, but you would need to talk to your grant administrator about, would be the workers' comp. If you don't have any employees, you don't need the workers' comp. And the auto, I'm not sure how the determination is made, but I think that's something that you can also work on possibly getting an exception on, depending on what type of services you're providing. I'm thinking if it was all virtual and there was never ever going to be anybody on the road, that's something that you might be able to get waived, but the rest are required.
That's correct, Lisa.
Awesome. So I will go up this list. And thank you everyone for putting your questions in the chat. So let's see. So do you work with NIAC because they specialize in nonprofits? Also, we have been using Betis Insurance in San Pedro for 10 years, and I highly recommend them for any nonprofit.
Yes, NIA is Nonprofits Insurance Alliance, or Nonprofits Insurance Alliance of California. They're an insurance company, and that's an example of an insurance company that you definitely need to work through a broker to access. They are a great option. They're a nonprofit themselves, but there's many competitive options. That is one of them, and they're great. We're a preferred broker of theirs. So yes, they're awesome.
Awesome, thank you. Will grantees be given funds from the award money to secure the insurance once we receive the quote?
Thank you, Mina. I will take that one. So if you do need financial assistance upfront to pay the down payment of the insurance, Amity will help with that. We will pay the insurance broker directly. That amount will come out of your grant award in the first payment. So it will come out of your grant. It will be deducted from your first quarterly payment of the grant. If you do need that assistance, please reach out to your grant advocate. You can reach out to myself, Joanne Sanchez, or you can reach out to Carol Marin, our Director of Operations, and we will assist you with that process.
Thank you. This one was already answered, but in case no one saw it or anyone did not see it in the chat, do year 2 grantees need a new and separate insurance policy for year 3? So no, if you are already a current grantee and are fully compliant, you do not need to add anything additional for your year 3 cohort. Will the slides be provided afterwards? Yes, we will definitely be providing the slides and the recording to this presentation. Just to confirm, the auto insurance portion is optional.
The auto insurance, I wouldn't say is optional. I think it depends on what the organization's doing and whether or not there's an auto exposure. If there's no auto exposure, then I don't think the coverage is required. But if there's people on the streets running errands or transporting people, of course, then it's going to be required. It's, I think, looked at on a case-by-case basis.
That's correct, Lisa. Thank you. Before you go to the next question, Mina, if I can just reiterate too, that all the insurance policies for cohort 3 should have an effective date of July 1st. Please do not put a date prior than July 1st. July 1st is the start of the contract. So all effective dates should be July 1st.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's something to clarify with whoever you're working with. If it's a new policy, let them know upfront, yes, even though I need it effective July 1st, I need my quote sooner. You can't wait until July 1st to get your quote. You can't wait to bind it on July 1st. You can bind it now effective July 1st. But just make sure that they're aware of that, your timing and needs.
Auto insurance needed now if I don't have auto but plan to get one.
I think if you're planning to get one when the grant starts, then yes, you should add it.
Well,
Lisa?
What we could do is start with the hired and non-owned auto so that the auto insurance is on the certificate. And then once you get the vehicle, you could schedule it onto the policy after the fact and just endorse it. You schedule it on after.
Does this apply if we use Uber for transportation?
Ooh, that's a great question. That is a great question. And I don't think I can answer. I don't think I have enough information to answer that. It would really, yeah, that's a rough one. I would need some more information about how that's all going down.
Joseph, if you could raise your hand and we'll get to more clarification at the end after all the chat questions if you want. Does workers' compensation coverage apply to remote workers in an organization? And the same question with general liability.
Yes, workers' compensation does apply to remote workers. As soon as you hire your first employee, workers' comp is mandated by law. So yes, and there is a class code for telecommuters. The rate is pretty low since the exposure is low, but not non-existent. I've seen claims for people working from home file workers' comp claims. So yes, it is definitely applies as soon as you hire your first employee. And yeah, general liability does extend to employees working from home as well.
And then someone asked, what is GLNWC? And someone did answer it, general liability and workers' compensation. Are all of the endorsements required also?
Yes. Yes, all of the endorsements are part of the insurance requirements.
Okay. If I lease a car for personal use and client transportation, should the car be registered in the org's name as well? What if a car or van is being used for a social enterprise?
Okay. So if there's a vehicle registered to an individual, not to the organization, that's where the hired and non-owned auto comes into play. You want to have insurance on that personal policy on that car, and the hired and non-owned auto is what you would get for the organization to protect the organization.
Okay. Is the insurance to protect the directors, etc., of the nonprofit considered an endorsement?
No, I think they're referring to directors and officers liability, and that is a whole separate insurance policy. That's not addressed in any of these insurance requirements. It's a separate policy. It's not an endorsement. It's a whole nother line of insurance.
Waiver of subrogation. Why do you need all that?
The waiver of subrogation, I believe most of the endorsements are here to protect Amity and make sure that Amity stays around. They have an exposure as a funder, and they can't be everywhere where all the organizations are at once to see how they're running. I mean, the insurance is here to protect everybody. So the waiver of subrogation is what it does is it waives the right of the whoever's named on it to their insurance to subrogate on your insurance. Kind of like what we see it a lot is on auto insurance. So if somebody hits my car and they're at fault, my insurance will pay out to get my vehicle repaired, but they will turn around and subrogate on the third party's insurance to get compensated back. Because it wasn't my fault, it was a third party's fault. So they're going to go and subrogate on their insurance so that my insurance is made whole again. What the waiver of subrogation does is it waives the right for the insurance company to subrogate. So the third party's insurance will not be able to come back and get paid for it at the end of the claims process.
And there was more to, I think, that little mini conversation. We have a blanket waiver of subrogation. Does Amity need to be specifically listed in the COI? Clarification, why do you need that for workers' comp? Your document stated for general liability and auto, but then later it said you needed it for all of them. Which is it? ETA, our insurance broker shared, there may be an additional premium charge if Amity needs to be specifically listed in the waiver of subrogation. Hope the blanket waiver would suffice.
That's a great question. And I am not sure about that answer. I was actually gonna ask Michael about that. If a blanket is acceptable or not. The way that I read it is I think it is acceptable. But please don't quote me on that. We can probably have to address that one later because I'm not sure how to answer that question. It is important to know.
Is Michael on here? Thought he was.
Yeah, hi, this is
Hey.
Michael. So Lisa, yeah, I believe it would. As long as we have a written document that says that. However, I would have to check that with Heffernan, so I'll have to get back to the whole group on it. But my own thought is that it would be okay.
Okay, I would think it would be acceptable as well. It's pretty much an equivalent to have a blanket. But thank you for jumping in.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. So looking for clarity, if Jail Guitar Doors owns an auto that will be used, what does Lisa recommend again for standard coverage?
If the organization owns the auto, you definitely want to have a commercial policy. So if you have an existing general liability policy or an existing hired and non-owned auto policy, your first thing that you want to attempt to do is schedule the policy on that schedule the vehicle on that current policy. That's usually the most cost-effective way to get commercial auto insurance, is to schedule it on with your other insurances. You can get a monoline or a policy by itself with Progressive or something like that is another option. But usually the most cost-effective way is to schedule it on, and then consider if you want full coverage or just liability insurance. But yeah, that's probably my best recommendation, is to schedule it onto an existing policy.
Thank you. Does physical sponsorship need its own insurance in addition to sponsored insurance? If so, is it the same as project insurance?
I'm not sure how to answer that question. If the question is posed that they're working under a fiscal sponsor, does the fiscal sponsor need the coverage, or does the awardee need the coverage? I'm not sure if that's what they're asking. So I'm not sure how to respond.
I can step in on that one. So really the agreement between the awardee and the fiscal sponsor is between them. Most fiscal sponsors do already have insurance and add the grantees named on their insurance policies. But we have seen the other side of that, where the fiscal sponsors do not pay for the insurance and the grantee takes on that piece, but that is an agreement between those two parties.
Right. Fiscal sponsor can and should add on your exposures to their insurance. If they aren't able to or aren't comfortable with that, then you should definitely get your own policy as the organization operating, to protect yourself and also to meet the insurance requirements. I've seen also fiscal sponsors not wanting to take on this kind of insurance liability. Some of these coverages, they don't, as the fiscal sponsor, have this liability. So they might not want to purchase all this insurance if they only have general liability. And that's when you might find yourself having to get it for yourself. So if you are working with the fiscal sponsor, then start today, having that conversation today, because it can get even more complicated. A lot of times, if you're working under a fiscal sponsor, I've seen organizations that aren't incorporated, they have no legal filings. So when that's the case and you're operating kind of as an individual and you're trying to get $1 million of abuse and molestation, it's not impossible, but it's pretty difficult to do. So if you're working under fiscal sponsor, it's time to start having these conversations now.
Okay. You stated that the waiver of subrogation is only required for general liability, auto, and workers' comp. However, the document from Amity seems to say that it is required for all coverages. Did we already answer this? I don't remember. I think so.
No, you skipped over it.
Lisa, could you answer this, please?
Yeah, I'm taking a look at the auto, workers' comp. I would have to see the insurance requirements. I'm not sure. Let me see, I'm looking at them right now. And maybe Michael can help me out with this one.
Yeah, hey Lisa, I'm looking now. I see the waiver of subrogation for commercial general liability, automobile liability, and workers' comp. And that's it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Did that answer the question? Just want to clarify.
Yeah, I'm the one that raised the question. And yeah, it answered the question, but when I sent the documentation over to my broker, they didn't see it that way. But if that's the problem, is they said that nobody would provide that waiver for sexual molestation or professional liability. So that was kind of hanging me up there. But since it's only required for those other three, auto, workman's comp, and general liability, then we're good.
Yep.
Yeah, I would confirm that too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing your information. I submitted a quote request to your company and will await a response. That's for you, Lisa.
Thank
Can
you.
you go over the endorsements again?
Yes.
There we
Okay, so the additional insured, this is very commonly requested. You're adding on the entity that's requesting it as another named insured onto your policy. So if that organization is also brought into the lawsuit, your insurance will extend to them as well. The more additional insureds you have, the more you're sharing your insurance limits with more entities. So if you have a long list of them, you might want to consider bumping up your insurance limits. But what you're doing is adding on that third party as another named insured. You're sharing your limits of insurance with them. The waiver of subrogation is waiving the right to recover costs. So if that additional insured kicks in and your insurance company is paying out to defend the third party, they cannot turn around and say, hey, we paid $500,000 to defend you. We want to get paid back. This waives the right for them to be able to do that. The primary non-contributory endorsement means that your insurance policy will be first to respond and is not asking for the third party's insurance to contribute to the lawsuit. They do not have to contribute any form of payment to that lawsuit. That's what that endorsement's saying. And the 30-day notice of cancellation is issued or executed if you're in jeopardy of canceling. So let's say you missed a payment and they send out a cancellation warning to you. Hey, if we don't get your payment in the next 30 days, we're going to cancel. Well, when that notification goes out, Amity will also receive a copy that your insurance is in jeopardy of cancellation.
All right, so if we are already getting a quote with an insurance, can we still connect with Charity One for a broker?
Yes, that's a great question. You can definitely work with multiple brokers at once. But it can actually hurt to work with multiple brokers at once. Well, the way that it works in commercial insurance is only one broker can approach a market at a time. So let's say that broker has already approached Nonprofits Insurance Alliance or NIA. I can't also go there to get a quote. Only one broker can go there at a time to get a quote. So if you are working with multiple brokers, it helps for the new broker to know what insurance companies you've already gotten a quote from. So that way they don't go and approach that same company, and what will happen is the market's blocked. So the insurance company won't be able to correspond with you at all because the organization's already working with somebody else. So you can definitely work with multiple brokers. Sometimes it doesn't really work to your benefit if you're working with somebody who knows all the markets that would be most competitive for you. Then you're probably best suited to work with that one person if they have all of those markets, because working with somebody else is only going to muddy it up more, and they won't have access to anything else. But if you're working with a broker that maybe only has one market, like I only have one option for you and I'm waiting back to hear from them, you want to start calling around if they only have like that one option. So yes, absolutely, you can work with multiple brokers at a time, but that's what you could run into is one of the brokers is going to be blocked and won't have any kind of options if you're working with somebody who has the market saturated.
Thank you. So my current insurance expires 9/2024. What does a broker have to do to start everything on 7/1/2024?
Okay, so we have it in September and you want it to be in July 7. Not sure why you would want to do that. Maybe to run concurrent with other policies. That's usually when we'll do a kind of switch like that, to have insurance policies run concurrent or expire at the same time. What that would require is a cancel. You could cancel effective 7, cancel rewrite. cancel effective 7/1 and rewrite effective 7/1. That's one way to do it. If you wanted it to be like as of next year, you could renew in July and ask them for it to expire in next July. So it would require some kind of cancel rewrite to accomplish that.
And then we, the Downtown LA Soccer Club, are a youth soccer organization and are covered by our administrative body called California Soccer Association. They issue all of our COIs. Is that acceptable, or do we need a COI with our club listed as insured?
I believe that Amity would need to see your organization's name on there at least to verify that your organization is actually covered, because if everything says the parent organization's name, there's no way to verify that your organization is covered under that policy. So I'm not the decision maker on this. I think Amity would need to make the final call, but what I would say is to at least have your organization's name on that certificate of insurance to confirm that it extends coverage to your organization. And then as long as you want to make sure that the policy is meeting all the other insurance requirements, limits, endorsements, and ultimately be able to back up that your organization is named on that policy as an insured.
You're correct, Lisa.
Thank you. And our current policy is calendar year. Do we need to obtain an extended policy in order to have the 7/1/24 through 7/1/25?
So I think what Amity is saying with the 7/1 is if you don't have insurance right now, you don't need to have it until 7/1. It doesn't need to be effective until 7/1 if you don't have insurance right now. If you do have insurance, you don't need to change it to be effective 7/1. You don't need to make those changes. If you have current insurance, keep it the way it is. Do not cancel rewrite. I don't think they're looking for you to cancel rewrite to meet these requirements. That was recommended for organizations that don't have insurance yet.
That is correctly. So we didn't want insurance that don't have insurance to have to pay for insurance prior to the contract execution date.
Perfect.
What if your current policy will renew before July 1st?
Yep, same.
Okay.
Keep the expiration dates the same. Don't change those.
If our staff carpool to off-site events for work purposes with the non-owned auto cover this, I heard carpooling may be an additional exposure.
No, I have not heard that. Non-owned auto would extend to carpooling. It might be a question on your application. Do you provide group transportation? And on that application, you would want to mark yes, that staff ride and car together, something you'd want to disclose during the application process. But yes, it would extend to that.
Oh, and Michael actually had stated, if auto is used only for commuting, then auto is not required. This is determined on the survey results for cohort 3. Thanks.
Perfect.
When getting a quote, should it cover the full 3 years?
No, the insurance quote will be annual terms, and then that's renewed. The policy is renewed every year.
And is the insurance due date still this Friday?
No, the due date of May 1st was for at least having a quote. We are asking that you get your final COIs as soon as possible with the effective date of July 1st so that we can start sending contracts out for signature.
Is an auto insurance policy needed if we hire a third-party transportation company to commute clients and staff to community outings?
That's a great question. Definitely want to make sure that the third party has insurance and names your organization as additional insured in case your organization is named in a lawsuit. I'm not sure if Amity would require for your organization to also carry it. But definitely want to make sure that third party has the insurance and adds your organization as additional insured.
And then 2 more organizations have Lyft for client transportation. So we can definitely get more information on that. I guess Lyft, Uber, all of those. Our policy expires 6/29/2024. How are renewals handled?
Okay. The insurance, the 6/29, you can maintain that effective date. And I believe as long as you have your renewal certificate in and uploaded to TrustLayer or given to your grant administrator, then you should be great, good to go.
I currently have insurance covering all of these conditions. I added additional insured as instructed, but do I need to now change the term of our policies to start effective 7/1?
No.
Please remind us on the need to have 2 separate COIs. We need one naming LA County and one naming Amity.
That's correct. That is why we need 2 separate ones, one naming the county and one naming Amity.
Thank you. If a vehicle is being used for a social enterprise and there are multiple drivers. That's all it said. Mary, if you could raise your hand and we'll get to you about this question for more clarity, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Our insurance company is asking for a copy of the contract in order to increase our coverage. When might we be provided with a contract?
We can send you a draft copy of the contract for you to send to your insurance broker.
Hey, this is Michael. I just wanted to jump in and say that there was an email that was sent regarding an insurance survey, and there's 2 links in that email. The bottom link is a PDF file of the contract language for insurance that should be in the contract, just FYI.
Yes,
you.
I usually start with that, the contract language and insurance requirements. I usually start with that to request insurance changes and let the insurance company know the contract hasn't been executed, and in order to qualify for this, they need to have the insurance. So I usually start with that. Some carriers are sticklers and they won't do anything until they see that contract. So at that point, I'm glad that they will provide a draft to satisfy the carrier and keep it moving.
And if that is the case where you do need the draft of the contract, please email me and I can provide that for you. I will put my email address in the chat.
Thank you. That makes it sound like you can't shop around for the best quote because all brokers contact NIA. Is this true?
No, not at all. You can definitely contact multiple brokers. If you can, there's no problem with that. No problem at all. One of them will be blocked. One of them's the market's going to be blocked, and they won't be able to access they can't go to the same carrier at once. So one of them will be blocked. You can't get 2 quotes from NIA. I can't give you a quote from NIA and then the next broker also give you a quote from NIA. Only one can. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with shopping it. You'll definitely make sure that you'll have all the options available the more people that you're talking to. What I was trying to say was only one broker can approach a market at a time. The other one will be blocked.
Will you send out this recording? Yes, we will. How long is a market blocked from a broker if a different broker has requested a quote from a carrier for us?
That's a good question. Different carriers handle it differently, but I would say the consensus is about 30 days. The quotes are valid for 30 days. So usually they'll keep the market blocked for another 30 days after that. So about 60 days. You can change brokers at any time. So say you're working with somebody and you have a quote from somebody, but their responsiveness hasn't been that great, and you're talking to somebody else and you really like them, you can sign your quote over to another broker through a broker of record letter process. So it can be reassigned to another broker if you're not happy with the service. But if we're dealing with timelines and you're very close to you're needing to turn in your insurance, signing that letter can delay the process. They allow the other broker usually 7 days to come back with a countermanding letter. So within that timeline of 7 days, nothing can happen because it's just a waiting game. So switching brokers through when you have a timeline or deadline isn't really recommended because it just pushes it out another week. But yeah, you can definitely shop around. Just one broker will be blocked and the other one will have more access to carriers. So usually the first one, the way that we look at it is the first to submit is the one that's going to get the account. So if you talk to somebody and it takes them 4 days to send it out, that's 4 days that another broker could be accessing that market. So it's a lot of times the first person to get there is the one that's going to get the quote. So definitely no problem with shopping around. Yeah, that's not what I was trying to say.
Amazing. Earlier, I thought it was said that we should not bind an insurance policy before 7/1. If we have already secured the insurance and all requirements, is that okay? We have provided the insurance info, including COI and additional endorsements.
Yes, that's perfectly fine.
And does commuting include when staff attend in-person workshops, not at our office location?
What was the question?
Does commuting include when staff attend in-person workshops, not at our office location?
Okay, I think that's probably a question for maybe Michael. I'm not sure how they respond to that on their intake form. What classifies as commuting?
Yeah, hi, Lisa, it's Michael. Generally speaking, commuting is thought to be just going from your home to where you work. It's when you start putting people in your car or carrying other things in it that we want to consider that a need for auto insurance. But if you're commuting just to a place to go to a workshop, I would consider that commuting.
Cool. So for clarity again, if you already have insurance, we are in our renewal process now. We can give you what we have.
Yes.
Yes.
They'll accept your current insurance certificate.
Okay. And then are we penalized if we don't have the quotes today?
Absolutely not.
What does COI stand for?
Certificate of insurance.
Can you give some examples of insurance a physical sponsor doesn't not need, being that a physical sponsor will not conduct direct services to clients?
If you're working through a fiscal sponsor and part of this agreement with Amity is to have the insurance requirements in place, all of the insurance requirements need to be in place. Whether it's under the fiscal sponsor's insurance or you obtain your own insurance policy, the insurance requirements are the same.
Our current insurance policy ends on 8/1. Can our insurance broker provide Amity Foundation with the current certificate and then just give you our renewed insurance that starts again on 8/1?
Yes.
Yes, as long as it has all the coverages and Amity and LA County named as additional insurers.
I noticed that on the sample COI, it lists damage to rental property limit as 1 million under general liability. Our coverage meets all other limits under general liability as the sample, but our limit for damage to rental property is 500K. Is this sufficient?
Yes, that limit is sufficient.
Who do we send our coverage policies endorsements to?
Please send all COIs, any insurance to TPA Finance at amityfdn.org. Or you can send it to your grant advocate and they will forward it on to that email address.
We are still awaiting a quote we may not receive today as requested. Should we let our grant advocate know?
Yes.
For the certificate, are we listing Amity or TPA, and what address do we use?
So you are using Epidaris at DBA Amity Foundation. With the email that was sent out with the insurance requirements, there were also attachments of sample COIs. Those sample COIs have the exact language that you need for Amity and Amity's address, and also for LA County and their address as well. If you do not have those, please reach out to your grant advocate and they can provide you with those documents.
And then TrustLayer is the email where those insurance surveys come from. Yes, there was an email sent today, so if you did not get that email, please check your spam folder. On the COI, what address do we list for Amity, and what address do we list for the county?
So again, that is the same answer as earlier. You should have received sample COIs in the initial email that I sent out with the attachments. If you did not receive that or you need them again, please reach out to your grant advocate and they could send them over to you again.
Okay. And then it seems like this one already was answered, and so is that one. Who are the top 3 companies you recommend to work with?
There are many insurance companies that provide insurance options. Not all of them will do everything. But I would say the top insurance companies, number 1 is NIA, or Nonprofits Insurance Alliance, which has been mentioned many times in this call. They're probably the most popular carrier for nonprofits right now. So NIA will only write organizations with the 501c3 nonprofit, Nonprofits Insurance Alliance, that's one. Philadelphia Insurance Company and United States Liability Insurance Company are probably 3 of the most popular for nonprofit and social service organizations. But again, you can't approach any of those companies directly and get quotes directly from them. You'd have to go through a broker. But those are 3 carriers that are great and can meet these requirements. There's other carriers out there that are very cost effective. You can go online and get a $500 insurance policy probably right now, but they're not going to offer these endorsements and abuse and molestation limits that are needed to meet these requirements. So those 3 carriers can.
And what is the proper way to ask about the endorsements to a broker?
Definitely want to share the insurance requirements with them. Send them the formal insurance requirements to start. You might need to, if they're not experienced working with endorsements, you might need to point them to the section where it's showing what endorsements are needed. But definitely want to send them the formal insurance requirements so that they can review them and extract out what all is needed.
And can we modify our survey entry? After this webinar, I now believe that we need to get auto non-owned coverage.
Yeah, hi, this is Michael. I'm tabulating these survey results. So I'll put my email address in the chat. If you want to send me an email directly, yes, you can submit the survey a second time. On the answer to question 1, it asks you for the organization's name and your program area. To the right of that, just put second response, so I'll know that it's being redone.
And I have insurance already, however, they won't give us sexual conduct and professional liability insurance. Would you suggest I get a separate quote just for those requirements?
That's a great question, and one that we get a lot. So you can get separate insurance. You can get abuse and molestation by itself and professional liability by itself, but it's very expensive. It's very expensive. Abuse and molestation by itself could be $2,500 for the year, up to $5,000 is very commonly seen. And professional liability is a little different, a little easier to get by itself. But the best thing to do is to find an insurance company that can do all of those in one package. That's going to be the most cost-effective option, is to package the insurance into one policy. So you might need to cancel the current coverage you have now if the pricing is of concern. If pricing is not a concern, you can absolutely get those 2 insurance policies by themselves.
Okay. And
Mina, if
then,
I
Yeah,
can
of
interrupt
course.
for 1 second, so I know we have gone over time. I just want to just thank everybody. For those of you that have to leave, thank you so much. We will stay on and answer these questions, so if you have time to stay on, please stay on. We will answer questions. If you have to leave, we totally understand. We will send out the PowerPoint. If you have any other questions, please reach out. For insurance questions, please reach out to Lisa internally. For your own stuff that you have already going on with Amity, you can reach out to Michael, or you can reach out to your grant advocate for any other questions. Again, thank you for joining. We will stay on to continue answering questions. Go ahead, Mina.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Should we just put our questions in the chat box? Because we've had a bunch of us that just our hands have been up for the whole time, and it seems like it's quicker through the chat. Just curious.
Anything you want. We can actually go to some raised hands. Serrano, if you want to come off mute and ask your question.
Like that. Hi there. And so I have a physical agent. You did answer some of my questions. Most of the coverage is already included with our current certificate of insurance, but we will need additional things. So I'm going to be getting a quote with them. We don't have the endorsements, but we have a long-standing partnership with that broker, so I'm sure they'll be able to help us out. The naming two certificate of insurers, that's kind of a new thing that I just learned about here. But I noted Joanne Sanchez's email in case I have specific questions. Those are some of the things that I was kind of going over, the questions that I had. And for the broker, yeah, so I think a lot of my questions were answered. And if I have any specific questions, I will email Joanne. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. George, do you want to come off mute?
Yeah, how you doing?
Hi.
Hi. So most importantly, we have the County of Los Angeles, we have Amity listed as additionally insured on our COI, and then we have the County of Los Angeles listed under our additional remark schedule as certificate holders continued. Is that acceptable, or do we need two completely separate COIs?
I believe Amity's looking for two separate COIs.
Copy that. In addition to that, and I know that the point has been kind of belabored at this point, but I just want to make sure I'm dotting all the I's. If we submitted today our COIs with all the coverage and the start date being 7/1/2024, we have current insurance. We do not need to do anything else. Like it is, we have current insurance. It's fine. We don't need to do anything to have a start date of 7/1/2024.
You're good.
Cool. And then one more question just about automobile liability. Currently our coverage is listed as any auto, hired autos only, and not non-owned autos only. That should be adequate coverage consisting. Great.
Yep. That's perfect.
And then just so two COIs, one for Amity, one for LA County.
Yes, you got it.
Thank you.
Of course.
And if you did not get the survey, again, email Michael. We just put his email in the chat. We'll put it again just in case. And I think Vivi, if you want to come on
Yes.
mute.
Hi, my name's Vivi.
Sorry
I'm
about
with
that.
Adventures to Dreams in Richmond. And we were wondering, we have a currently existing insurance policy, and it's going to be up for renewal on the 20th. I don't think it covers all the things that Amity needs, though. And we're just kind of wondering, because the contract itself starts on July 1st, if that's correct. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, if we get if we want to get a new insurance policy, like what would be a good timeline for that to make sure that we can get, I'm assuming we can use the money from the contract to pay for the new insurance policy. I'm sorry if that question was confusing.
No, I understand. So you have your insurances coming up really quickly for renewal, but it doesn't meet all the requirements. So you want to start now to see if it can meet requirements. Ask now if it can, that way when it renews, you can either renew it as compliant or you can endorse it to be compliant, effective 7/1. Ask that question now, because if you can't meet those requirements, you might not want to renew with that carrier and renew with the carrier that, move it to a carrier that can meet the requirements.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm just wondering if we have to change carriers, would we just don't renew with the existing insurance policy? I'm just kind of worried about the time in between trying to get the new insurance versus canceling the current policy.
Exactly. So yeah, you want to have the conversation now. If you can get it to be compliant, you're good. Otherwise, you might have to renew with another carrier. And the logistics of that would need to be looked at kind of like at a case by case basis. And need to get more information and learn about your organization to see what kind of options there are, because you might be able to renew with equivalent to what you have and then endorse on the additional coverages that you need to be compliant later. That might be an option. Otherwise, you might need to renew in full compliance effective your expiration date. It just would need to be kind of reviewed individually.
Okay, that makes sense. And in the case that we are able to become compliant, let's say we just renew on May 20th, and what's the process to make sure that we can have the money from the Amity grant to cover that? Or do we just
please email me for that. I did put my email in the chat. I will put it in there again.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is all very new to our organization, so we just really want to make sure that we have everything ironed out. Thank you.
No problem.
Happy to help.
Lisa, what is the cost range of professional liability, generally speaking?
That really varies. So some carriers you can get it added on to the existing insurance for $400. Some carriers. I think the minimum premium right now with Nonprofits Insurance Alliance is like $700 for the year for $1 million limit. And then getting it by itself, I mean, if you're an individual professional, you can join a membership organization and you could probably get it for a few $100s. Otherwise, if you're a nonprofit organization looking for a standalone professional policy, it would probably be $2,500 for the year to get it by itself. Okay.
And what is the average price of sexual misconduct policy if packaged all together?
Oh, packaged. Okay. Packaged, I think average is like $600 for the year, but it's dependent on your number of participants, dependent on the exposure. But I think it starts off about $600 most times.
Thank you. And I believe that is all of the questions.
Awesome.
All right, if there's no more questions, we'd like to thank again everybody for joining. Hope you have a great day. Any additional questions for insurance, please reach out to Michael for internal Amity questions on insurance. Reach out to Lisa if you have any questions on just overall general questions about insurance. You have your grant advocate, myself, and Carol. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out. Again, congratulations and thank you for joining us today. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
This